face. You were with the crowd yelling, it was
We
fun.
can call the facilities, meeting to order, and we'll do buildings and grounds first, and we'll need a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting by Evelyn. If we have a second by Mark. Any changes, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. And we'll turn over to you, Jeff and Frank.
Mr. Chairman, the first item is on page 2. It's a resolution to extend the contract or renew the contract with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Lawrenceburg for an annual amount of $30,000.
Okay, any questions? Motion by Edna. We have a second. By Ron. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll take the next one. On page 4 is a request for a new contract. This is with Clark Patterson Lee. This is a term contract for periodic multidisciplinary engineering. We've used Clark Patterson for in the past and some other firms in the past, but it's for building type systems, HVAC, plumbing, architectural work. We get into some environmental issues, building environmental issues like asbestos and lead, and we recently did a RFP. I had this at last committee, and we basically delayed it a month to give the committee members some more information on how the selection was done, and we've included in that a memo. It starts on page 10 regarding the selection process and how we came up with the recommendation. And you'll see the summary on the last page, page 13, which shows our calculated cost, and in comparison, which shows the lowest cost being the Clark Patterson Lee proposal.
Anybody have any questions? Rachel?
On subsection H, where termination date of contract 1-year term extendable for 2 additional 1-year terms, do you have to come back to ask for approval for the additional 1-year terms, or by this resolution that authorizes?
This resolution authorizes that. So what occurs is at the end of the first year, a letter will go out. Usually the purchasing agent will send that out to the consultant or to the contractor, but it's a common practice, I guess, on a lot of our contracts. Ask them if they want to extend under the same terms, if they're willing to hold their pricing and extend under the same terms, and at the same time we do an internal review to make sure that their work has been satisfactory and we don't think that there's a benefit to the county by going back out to RFP or to bid. Then we'll recommend that we extend, and once they sign that extension letter, it just gets attached to the original contract. It's a common practice. I think the 1 year with 2 additional year extensions, we use a lot on our term contracts for contractors like roofing, plumbing, electrical, and also any of our term contracts for consultants. We do that method a lot.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Mark?
I just have a comment. I want to commend Kevin for doing an excellent job on this, and I want to say thank you for getting this material out in advance of this meeting. I read this thoroughly, and I reviewed it with an engineer. It's excellent work, and I really appreciate understanding how you came to your decision. So with that said, I'm sorry the local firm Chazen got nipped out, but the lowest cost, there it is through Clark Patterson, and I'll support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? You have a motion to approve? Motion by Evelyn. We have a second by Mark. Any more discussion? Mr. Whitehead.
Just a quick question. I understand the reason to do this for small projects and everything. Is there a threshold on when you would bid this, or is that just a case-by-case basis?
For the professional services, there is not a threshold. On instances where it's a contracted service, like what's termed a public works project, there is a threshold. I think it's $35,000 where it would have to be bid. But there is no such threshold on professional services.
Okay. there is no requirement, or there is, well, I
There is
mean,
no
you-
requirement.
no requirement.
Right.
I mean, you could
You
decide
certainly
that-
have the option, yes.
and each time you'd probably look at that and say if there's a benefit, if there's a reason that we might expect that, you know, we could bid this and save some money or get a better engineer, that
Right.
could be done if you,
Certainly.
just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll move for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? So moved.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The next section under referrals and pending items, just give the committee a brief update on the RFP for solar system. This is regarding the Cornell site up in Warrensburg, where we have Cornell and Countryside adjacent to the county fairgrounds in Warrensburg, as well as the town of Warrensburg has a well field there. We have been, active on those RFPs, and our consultant has really gone back to the lead proposers and requested clarifications or additional information to allow us to better analyze this. A lot of questions have gone back. We've gotten some initial responses, and we've got some more questions for them. So that's still underway. We're comfortable with our timeline in completing that and coming back to a recommendation hopefully next month. And that would bring, if we decide to move forward with any of the proposers, that would give them enough time to proceed and get their NYSERDA approvals and then begin construction in the spring. But we're doing a thorough process on that, and I don't have a recommendation for the committee yet. The next item.
Just a second. Mark, go ahead.
Excuse me, Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, we talked about, when you are at the point of making recommendations, that you would get out to the committee in advance of the meeting, at least, I think Paul said 5 days or a week or something, the material, so we can review it in advance. We're still planning on doing that?
Right.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Frank, you want to handle?
Sure. I received a email from the Justice Department a couple weeks ago, stating that they're no longer interested in leasing from the county. They're pursuing another building site. I'm not sure where, it's in the area somewhere, but, so, at this point, we have about 1,200 square feet in the new building that was earmarked for them, but they're not interested in it.
Okay.
Okay, the next item is, I think we just handled, that's the contract with Clark Patterson that was referred back to this meeting, so that's been handled. Under item 5, information for discussion, wanted to give the committee a update on our court space expansion project, and that again has been active as well. As you know, the last board vote essentially endorsed the concept of the addition onto the north end of the building and then the remodeling of the existing court space. That was formulated and sent to OCA, Office of Courts Administration, and their architects for review and comment. So we were on hold over the winter for a little while getting those comments back. We have since received comments from their lead architect and addressed many of them. Many of them were relatively minor. I mean, it was evident to me when we met with Clark Patterson and reviewed the recommendations of OCA that they really got into the nitty-gritty in the details, so far as even the orientation of tables, the number of chairs. This was not a cursory review. It was a thorough and detailed review. I'm happy to say they didn't have any major concerns with what had been proposed. Clark Patterson and their engineers and architects, in particular John Norris, have gone through those changes and modified the plans in those areas that there is consensus among all parties that there wouldn't be a problem with those changes. The last time we met with Clark Patterson, there were some areas where we still needed to do some really internal county discussions on how court agencies and non-court agencies that do business in the courts accounted for some of the changes, and that's really underway now. Our hope was to get those offices on the same page as far as what was acceptable to them and come to a consensus over the next, over this week and into next week, and have a plan back, ready for a committee that says, all right, here's what OCA said, and here's what we changed, here's what the courts, the internal courts said, and here's what we changed, and here's what DA and probation and corrections at the county level have said, and here's what we changed. So that is underway. Our hope is to have those final comments and consensus among all agencies by the end of next week, by February 6th. And then our hope, if that occurs, is to come back to and have a special committee on or around February 13th, where we can give the committee a comprehensive update with Clark Patterson here to review, here's the concept and here's what changed, to get everybody up to speed on a recommended final concept to move into final design. At that meeting too, we would discuss our next steps as far as contracts and schedule, and then really we're proceeding on a path that's really more architects and construction focused, to be able to get us out to bid as early as possible and get under construction as early as possible this year. So that's our general plan. I think we'll have more information next week. Committee members will probably know by the end of next week whether that meeting is gonna happen or not on the 13th, or whether we need to delay it further, in order to get everybody on the same page.
Do you have any questions as far as where we're at, or where we're proceeding? Our attempt would be to have a lot of this stuff resolved so that Clark Patterson is comfortable going further, going ahead, and then at the February board meeting, we could do some approvals to get this going on their level. And of course there's bonding and et cetera that's involved, so there's a lot of pieces, and we're preparing for success. Hopefully it doesn't get delayed, because if we miss this board meeting, naturally March will be our next target date, and each month is critical as far as our temporary exposure at the end of this, when we have the judge come on board January 1st of 2016. Okay. Mark?
A question about the bonding, at some point, I don't know if it's our committee or finance, but I'd like to see from the treasurer's office the status of current loans, bonds outstanding, and what the future projected cost of this project is, and how it ultimately impacts, what's getting paid off and going off the books versus what is gonna be going on in the books with this project. If we could at some point get an update on that to see what the budget impact is, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Bring that forward. I think we have.
I think that a
We did that basically before, well, I can't remember which meeting it was, but one of the major meetings where there was a presentation to the board, we put together all that information. So what I'll do is, I'm kind of busy this afternoon, tomorrow morning, I'll send it all out again to everybody, what it was is, what our debt is now, and projecting it out to the end of each one of those bonds, and what we based on, I think we based it on 16 million, what a 20-year bond, the payments would be, and what our fiscal advisor recommended that the interest rates might be. And what those payments would be starting and going to the end of that 20-year bond.
And that included what is currently on the books?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we'll send that again, probably I'll get that up to you.
I'll just go back in my email and look it up.
Yeah.
Let you
Well,
know. It's already been done.
And along those same lines, that analysis was helpful at the time, and that was probably 6 weeks or 2 months ago that was done. So what we'll be working with the treasurer's office on any updates to that. If it looks like we're ready from a design standpoint to move forward, and then also couple, the next steps in design with some bonding for the project overall. We'll wanna update those on any new information. Maybe the bond rates have gone up or down or not changed.
And the other thing is that at the next finance meeting, I will be making a presentation to determine who our bond counsel will be, because we have to have bond counsel to do this. We already have a fiscal advisor, who basically is the person that sells the bonds. On contract, we've had him for a couple of years now, and actually have a very favorable rate on that deal. But, yeah, finance committee meeting next week, I'll be making a presentation as to who the bond counsel should be. And Michael, Supervisor Moreau expressed the fact that the bonding rates are as low as they're ever gonna be, and it only looks like they're going up, so that by us executing and being expedient about getting into this, that would be better than not, and extending this. So it's still that, the way the treasurer's office feels, and has there been any movement in bonding and interest rates?
Right now, everything is kind of just, over the holiday season, everything just kind of just stays the same. The projections I've received going into 15, they're gonna start to climb. Not right away, but they're gonna probably start to climb near the middle of the year. So, you know, I'm not trying to push this project, but the sooner we act on that, the cheaper it's gonna be for us.
Okay. And can you explain to me, when our decisions get made, what's the lag time, or when do we get locked into an interest rate?
When we sell the bonds.
Which is that immediate, I mean,
Well, that would probably, if we pick a bond counsel, we would have, there's several things that the county has to do in order for us to proceed, to go through that. I mean, there's resolutions that have to be done, agreements that have to be made, and we have to have a pretty good figure as to what we want to bond for. You know, a couple of months. I mean, we planned, when we first talked to the fiscal advisor, this is January, February, March, hoping to go to sale on the bond somewhere in March, or first part of April. That's the projection, and that's when the rates hopefully will still be as good as they are right now.
the best case scenario, February's full board meeting, there's approvals made to go forward with the design and construction documents, et cetera. That would lead us to what you're talking about?
Yeah, well then when we get bond counsel on board, there's certain things that have to be done, and I don't wanna misspeak on this, but there is gonna have to be a board resolution at some point in time that specifically authorizes me to go out as the county treasurer and bond this project, okay? And that has to be done just right. I'm not the person to write that. That's the bond counsel. That's part of the contract, that they would write that resolution to make sure that it's done properly. I don't imagine we're gonna be able to do that much before the March meeting.
Okay.
My guess
But
would be.
but the finance committee has been briefed, and they understand that that's coming down the pike, and that's important?
It will be at this next meeting, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Jug?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's no secret that I haven't really been for this from the beginning. I just thought there was other options that are less costly for the county residents. $16.5 million was, bonding out was just, I thought, extravagant. My understanding was we needed about 5,200 to 5,400 square feet in that range for the new judge. Frank was nice enough to take me across the street and take a look at the empty building we have over there. They used to house 2 departments, 2,400 square feet. It would cost probably about $80,000 to renovate to make it handicap accessible. Across the street, in our new building, right across from us, we had 1,500 square feet available, and now Frank says we got 1,200 that the Justice Department's gonna be planning on moving out, correct, Frank? That's another 1,200?
They're not there, it's vacant now.
That's included
It's
in
fake,
that.
oh, that was included in the 1,500 that you told me about, okay. Well, that changes a little bit, 'cause I'm just doing the numbers briefly, I was thinking 15, you know, and 12 is 2,700, 2,400 across the street, that's 5,100 right there. And, we could just take a few departments, move them across, and put the new judge right here in this building, which we all agreed needed to happen. And we sure as heck could have done it for a lot less than $16 million. So that does, if that's not additional footage, I thought that was, what you're saying was additional footage. Okay, so then basically we're back to square one, although I did recommend a while back that we take tourism and move them off campus here, which was 1,000 feet, because in my mind, people from visiting our area don't come to Warren County's tourist department very often. I thought putting it in Lake George or even in the mall, would be more of a mecca for a tourism department. But anyway, I just wanted to go on record saying I thought we didn't quite explore the other options as well as we could have, and there was some other. But one final question. This bond, will that exceed our 2% tax cap, or is that separate?
That's a separate analysis that we have to make, under the law. The 2% is how much you have to raise in taxes, and the question will be what that impact will be in our total budget when we go into 2016. One of the strategies that I have suggested, is to sell one of our parcels, this year of land and use that funding to hopefully make bond payments for a year or maybe even 2. I don't know, it depends what we get for it and depends what the bond payments are. But, we will have to blend this in. And one of the good points is, as has been mentioned, is over time, some of our other bond payments are expiring, so that we should be able to offset a little bit. But there will be a crunch during the first 2 or 3 years here that we need to cover somehow without breaching that 2% tax cap. So there's a challenge there, there's no question about it. And like I say, one of the strategies I have encouraged is to sell off one of those parcels to provide revenue to help us through this time period. And there will be some other things we can take a look at as well, but that's gonna be a challenge.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. All right.
For buildings.
Okay, that's good for buildings and
At
grounds.
least to this point, I for one would like to, commend you, Mr. Chairman, and the staff, for, how you've handled it to this point in time. I think that it's, been a very open process. I think we looked at all the options that have been put out there, by folks, all the ideas that have been put out there. We have a financing plan that, Treasurer prepared, and I think Paul's correct, there's, 2 or 2.5 years in there where I think it shows, that, some additional money would be required, to help with the, to ensure that the project doesn't have a significant impact on the tax rate, so. And I think all of that was demonstrated because at the meeting where all the judges and office space planning people at our board meeting, the question was asked, are there any issues, any questions for these folks while they're all here? And we didn't hear anything from any of the supervisors, and what that tells me is, at least to this point in time, I think people understand what's being done, and because I think if they had issues with the courts system or the office space planning people with the court system, that would have been the time while they were all assembled there to discuss some of these issues. So that doesn't mean there won't be issues going forward. I understand that, but I mean, at least to this point in time, on a very large and complicated project, I think it's being handled very well.
We just one other thing, we have noted that, because there's 16 new judges going out about the state, the Office of Court Administration is looking very detailed at how all counties are proceeding. And they've been very cooperative, with how we've gone about it, and we've gotten responses back, very quickly so that we can move ahead here. Any move we make here has to go down there, has to be approved or talked about and back. So we feel fortunate in that we're getting that cooperation. And it's been said that other counties have a lot more difficulties than we do with what they're up against, getting those new judges. So we feel that in some respects our reviews also are a precursor to how it's going to be for the other counties. The detail that Jeff was talking about, et cetera, we are kind of like the doormat here for the start of these other operations. So we feel we're in a very good position. Clark Patterson's done a great job. John Norris is the perfect guy to have for this with his experience and where he's been in the state. So we're very, very comfortable with how we've been doing so far, and the input from Judge Krogman's offices, and Judge Breen's, et cetera, Judge Hall, and New York City, and in Albany with Judge Caruso. So we've been fortunate in that people are really trying to get the end goal and get this thing taken care of properly. And that helps us, I think, with our bonding rate, which ultimately we're very concerned with. Okay, and I think that concludes buildings and grounds, and we can move to airport. Thank you, Frank. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item on the agenda is a resolution request to amend the contract with Downs Tree Service for the runway 1 to end obstruction removal project. The purpose of the amendment is to process a change order to adjust for actual quantities of work on the project. On the back of your agenda, page 1, is the resolution request form. The net change for the change order is a reduction of $98,707 to the project. Pages 2 and 3, is a summary table, showing what those changes are to the project. The principal change is a reduction of about 4 acres of tree removal work.
Ellen, you have a question, or are you moving it?
I was moving it.
Okay, moved by Evelyn, seconded by Ron. Further discussion? Mark?
I have a question about the 4 acres that were, could you explain the 4 acres? Like, was it just found out not to be necessary, or why didn't they do the 4 acres?
Originally, that 4 acres was included in the project, because it is absolutely necessary to remove those trees for the instrument approach procedures to the runway. However, back in 2006, when the original environmental assessment was done for this project, that area, that section of trees was not included in the environmental assessment, the federal process. We do have state permitting approval for that tree removal work. We included that federal approval in the runway extension environmental assessment, anticipating it would have been accomplished by now. Unfortunately, that didn't take place. So without federal approval, federal environmental approval, we can't spend federal dollars to remove those trees. The intent is for county forces to go in there this winter. We'll cut it down ourselves, that's 4 acres, and we'll move forward with the project. This change order is the final change order for the project. The next steps will be to process project closeout.
So we'll be seeing in the near future a proposal for the county to pay for that work to be done
We'll do it in-house with airport staff.
with airport staff?
Yeah, it's a small area. Probably under another project in the future, another tree removal project, we'll probably go in and clean up the area, but, you know, and add it on to another project later on.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a motion and a second. Call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for committee approval for in-state travel for myself to attend the annual NIAMA Aviation Advocacy Day in Albany. This is the annual meeting where we go down to Albany and have meetings with our state representatives to talk about aviation issues statewide. It's a $95 registration. Is included in the budget, and a copy of the notice is in your packet.
Moved by Evelyn. Do we have a second? Mark? Any discussion? Hearing none, call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, next item on the agenda is another request for committee approval for in-state travel to send our 2 airport firefighters to ARF training, Aircraft Rescue Firefighter Training in Rochester, New York. This is the FAA required annual recertification and live burn for our firefighters. So approximately $900 total to send both the guys out there, plus some meals and tolls. The amount is included in our budget.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Moran, second. Evelyn, discussion? Mark?
We're gonna do this, you know, I've never been clear in my mind what we actually have at the airport in the way of fire, services. Could you just take a minute or two and just explain what we actually have out there? We have a facility with a fire truck, and firemen, do they work 7 days a week? I mean, we can do this another time, but, you know, I can just do it offline with you, but I've never really understood what's at the airport, and, it'd be great if we just, I mean, maybe the rest of the committee knows, but I don't. It'd be great to know what we actually have going on out there.
Sure. Well, we provide Index B ARF coverage. Basically, that provides for aircraft rescue firefighting truck with 1,500 gallons of water, 200 gallons of foam capability, and we train 2 firefighters. They are at the airport 5 days a week, normal business hours, and they are on call 24/7. We do have 2 trained, so that if one is on vacation or out of town, we always have at least 1 trained firefighter available to respond to emergencies. We also utilize mutual aid for all of our firefighting services, as well as EMT services. We use mutual aid for that services as well. Beyond that capabilities, how the truck is equipped, we have a KME like I said, 1,500-gallon aircraft rescue firefighting truck. It's a highly specialized piece of equipment. It is housed in the firefighting building, the ARF building, which is located just north of the terminal building. I'd be happy to give anyone a tour, show you the equipment. And, we like to put it out on display during Bloom Festival. I'm sure most of you have seen it out there. It's a remarkable piece of equipment, and, the firefighter training that they receive in Rochester is really second to none. It's fantastic. It's a full pit simulator, propane simulator, and it's really fantastic. They are prepared for the worst case scenario.
Jeff, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that the committee's, clear that these are existing, airport maintenance, workers. So they're on site 40 hours a week, those two firefighters, but that's not what they're doing. They're not sitting, waiting for the siren. This is an additional duty, so they are trained in the event that they need to respond or there is a request for that capability. But they are, 40 hours a week doing airport maintenance, and this is a additional duty, not a primary duty.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, yes, good point.
Evelyn?
I was just gonna say that when we first received the new equipment, we did go out as a committee and take a tour, and it is a very impressive piece of equipment. I was gonna suggest maybe sometime this summer, I think in previous years, occasionally we'd had one committee meeting at the airport in which we did some kind of tour, or since we have a few new members, maybe when the weather's more agreeable, we should look at perhaps maybe having a meeting at the airport where we could, take the newer members and actually go and look at some of the stuff. I think it's helpful to see it and actually understand it a little bit more.
Mark?
See that most of our traffic takes place in the summer on the weekends. What do we do on the weekends? They work 5 days a week, I take it. Do they work Saturday and Sundays, or Monday through Friday?
No, they work Monday through Friday.
Mhm.
They're on call on the weekends if there's an emergency.
They're on call, okay.
Yeah, basically, yep.
The other important thing to note is that, this isn't the only firefighting, crew that is called for an emergency. There's still the mutual aid system in all of Queensbury where those other, fire companies still respond to airport incidents. It is not exclusively, those two guys in one truck.
Yeah, we make an emergency plan. We do a tabletop exercise annually with mutual aid and responding agencies, involved agencies. There's numerous methods for notification in the event of an emergency.
Great, thank you, that's really helpful, appreciate it.
Rachel?
Just a quick question, and I do wanna say thank you, Ross, during the Bloom Festival this year, you were nice enough to take me out, and I got a great education on not only the fire department piece of it, but the airport as a whole, so it was very helpful, coming into this committee as well, having that background. But my question regarding, the on-call or the additional duties, is there a stipend with that, or is it like a volunteer basis, or what happens, if they're...
There's a small stipend, I believe it's $1,200 or $1,500 a year each.
Okay. And do we have any grant funding or anything that covers any of the firefighting?
All the equipment is grant eligible. The firefighting gear, the ARF gear itself is reimbursable under federal grants as well.
We take advantage of that?
Oh, absolutely, yep.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. With no further questions, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Moves?
Okay, next on the agenda under, section 5, information for discussion and review. Page 12 of your packet, I've included a copy of the airport's capital improvement program, the ASIP as we like to call it. This is a document that's required by the FAA. We update it on a regular basis. This is the latest version of that document. It was updated back in November. We did have a meeting with the FAA on December 3rd to review this document, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure that funding is programmed for these projects. There's no action necessary by the committee or the board at this time related to this document. All the significant projects in this program are already in the master plan. A few other projects that aren't in master plan, like equipment replacement, for example, that's not a master plan project, but it is shown on here for funding purposes. It's a planning tool. So some of this funding will likely shift and change priorities as we advance these projects and look at how those projects are going to be phased. But this is a 5-year look at what our capital improvement program has a customary federal share, 90%, state 5%, and local 5%. So these are all federal eligible reimbursable projects. Same program that we had last year, is we're just moving forward.
Jeffrey?
I just wanna make sure the committee understands that this is a working document, so even what was generated back in November and what was reviewed in December will change, you know, and can change at any moment, due to progress of projects or, priorities changing at the FAA. And if you can picture the FAA staff who is managing these projects across the entire state and dozens of airports, they have a similar ASIP, that they are getting from other airports. They're rolling all in together to make sure they've got enough money in each federal fiscal year to cover the project. So, I just wanna make sure you understand this is a working document. It's a tool we use. It is not set in stone, and it will modify as, priorities change at the FAA, or as projects are delayed or accelerated at the local level. There's a constant, working of these numbers to make sure that, at least from the perspective of the county and our consultants and state DOT, their aviation bureau, as well as FAA, are all on the same page on a regular basis, and we all work off of the same document, so that we don't get to a point in a project where we thought funding was gonna be coming in the form of a grant, and, somebody's left surprised that it's not available. So I just wanna make sure that everyone understands this will change on a regular basis throughout the year.
Any questions? Go ahead, Mark.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. I would like to formally make the request that I be allowed to go to the next FAA meeting. We had a county facilities meeting on December 2nd. I have the notes. I read through them again just to make sure I was correct. Nowhere in that meeting was the trip to the FAA on December 3rd discussed. So going forward, I would like to ask that I be included. I know that you went with Evelyn. I have total confidence in you.
This is my third time.
Right, but you represent Glens Falls and Evelyn represents Thurman. This is, you know, over $10 million of money being spent in Queensbury. And, I would like to go as a Queensbury representative, or I would like to have at least one of my colleagues, Rachel or John Straub, be invited to go, seeing that so much of this work is taking place in the town of Queensbury.
This is no way a takeover of chairmanship for the facilities committee, though.
No, sir, I don't think I'd get the votes.
Evelyn?
I'm just gonna, for the record, beg to differ with Mr. Westcott. This isn't a Thurman project, this isn't a Glens Falls project, this is a Warren County project. We go as representatives of Warren County. I do not go down as the representative of the town of Thurman. We're all here to represent Warren County and the best interests of the county as a whole, not any particular town, and I'd just like to note that. Thank you.
Mark?
I'd like to respond to my esteemed colleague. I would just like to ask her if there was a $8, $10, $12 million project taking place in Thurman that involved a federal agency and a state agency like the DEC, would you appreciate knowing about those meetings and possibly having the opportunity to participate in them?
I think, if I may respond, we do know about them. We've been going for a number of years. They've been reported for a number of years. It's not any surprise. As Mr. Gerard said, he's gone for 3 years. I've gone down several times. This isn't a surprise. This is an annual meeting that we've done every year for a number of years, so I don't think that it would be fair to say that you didn't know what was going on. You know, it's obviously been reported in committee. If you've been reviewing the notes and attending, you're gonna know that it's happening. Not a surprise there. Certainly, I think it's appropriate, the chair and, Supervisor Gerard has invited me as the vice chair to attend. If that's his prerogative, that's certainly, you know, something he can. But you should also be cognizant of your quorum requirements and the size of the committee. The committee structure has changed this year, and should the chairman decide that he'd like to make a change, that's fine. But you also have to remember about quorum requirements, and if you're going to have a number of supervisors attending and trigger a quorum, now you're gonna have a moving public meeting, you're gonna have to move your clerk of the board. Things can get messy rather quickly. So, you know, that's ultimately at the chair's decision. It's certainly not my decision. It's certainly not any member of the committee's. I leave that to the chair.
Mark?
Once again, my colleague is all over the rules, and she's very good at that. I appreciate the quorum discussion. My request was to just have the opportunity to discuss it. If for some reason I'm not allowed to go, or I can't go because of a quorum situation, or someone wouldn't agree to allow me go and maybe they step down. I'd like the opportunity to review what is going to take place in that meeting prior, and the opportunity to write out some questions and comments and submit that as part of the meeting so that the FAA could respond. I think that's a fair request.
I think it's fair.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Rach?
I don't wanna discuss this topic, but on meetings, I just wanted to bring up an issue that perhaps, now, you know, being a little more well-versed in the quorum aspect of it as well, I'm just wondering, I had the opportunity over the holidays, to speak with Rich Skimmerhorn about, we all know expenses at the airport, we're looking for any possible way to try to decrease them, right? Increase our revenues and decrease expenses, and he had some really good ideas. You know, it was a sidebar conversation, and I just wondered if perhaps there was an opportunity either to bring him in here where all committee members are, or perhaps, you know, maybe I could be involved in a meeting with him, or maybe this is already taking place.
Could I
I'm
have the
looking at
chairman address that?
Yeah, we haven't had any meetings with him.
Is that something we can pursue?
Well, I think there was an email from Mark, saying that Rich had talked to you about how he could save
Mm-hmm.
extravagant amount of money, and the chairman had discussions with me, and we have had those meetings with Rich, but if that in fact is said to you, the chairman said we need to bring him in. Last I knew, he was headed on vacation, and as soon as he got back, we were gonna try to get a hold of him and have him come in and show us where those savings are, et cetera.
Well, I just, you know, I'm happy to help in any way, or if I can, you know, talk with you outside the meeting, whatever needs to happen. I just thought that because of the time frame, it, you know, was within the last month, and, I think some really good ideas that would be worth pursuing, and of course, we're all for trying to keep quality and cut expense, so.
And I just remind everyone that this next FAA meeting is December. It's imperative that you win the election to make it appropriate for your attendance.
Support, Mr. Chairman.
What else do we have?
Information for discussion. On the last page of your pack, I've included a few snapshots of the renovations to the old cafe space and the terminal building for the airport. Mr. Skimmerhorn has also begun construction on the site for the new restaurant. There is an issue that has arisen during the construction. Mr. Skimmerhorn, they saw cut the asphalt in the parking lot for the new building, broke up the asphalt, began to excavate soil, and they immediately detected odor of fuel, contaminated soil. The project was halted, and DEC was notified of the contaminated soil. At this point in time, the project is on hold until we can get a environmental remediation company on board. DPW Engineering is gonna assist with that. We're gonna work with DEC to come up with a work plan. We do not know what the extent of the contaminated soil is. The project site is immediately adjacent to the old aviation fuel farm. There were a couple of buried underground tanks that was remediated back in 1996. This may be just a very small contamination. It might be a little bit more, but whatever the case may be, whatever we end up discovering, we will remedy the situation. We'll have to separate the contaminated soil from the clean soil and dispose of the contaminated soil appropriately. Until we start investigating, we won't know the extent.
I just wanna make sure it's 100% clear that this is an old spill. There is not a problem with our current tanks. We have all above-ground tanks at the, airport now, which are obvious if there's any issues, and there are none, with those tanks. We are, I did speak with Bill Lamy briefly, about the last project, and he recalled that there was a spill opened and a spill closed. And I've seen it happen at other sites, both when I was private sector, and at the county, where, you know, a spill number is opened, an investigation, remediation is done, but if not all of it's gotten, you can dig up the same site decades later and find an odor of petroleum. So, unfortunately, at the airport, we have very shallow groundwater. It was common and routine in the past to bury mild steel tanks, even in groundwater, and expect them to last. So they all leaked all over the state. There are the same problems with buried steel tanks and shallow groundwater that all fail. So I think that's what we're dealing with here. The problem really will be timing and schedule to be able to get this, completed. We have a good working relationship with the DEC, and they understand, our take on it, and that we'll be responsive and work with them closely to make sure that we do all the investigation necessary and work with them for a remediation plan. And then hopefully we can get this resolved as quickly as possible and keep, Skimmerhorn, Holdings on path, for their spring construction. So, we'll keep the committee updated. I think, by next committee, we'll probably have some costs in mind. We'll need to start exploring, how we're gonna pay for the remediation costs. But right now, we're working on getting, environmental contractors on board to be able to initiate some assessment.
Any questions? Mark?
Just a quick question about the restaurant. Has there been any further discussion about whether or not breakfast is gonna be served at the airport?
I did contact Mr. Skimmerhorn. He did respond and say that he wasn't going to require the new operator to serve breakfast. He said that would be his preference, that they serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but understanding that, in this particular situation, this particular location and market for the airport, it may not be possible to serve 3 meals. Staffing-wise, it's difficult to staff a restaurant for a breakfast, lunch, and dinner service. His preference is to have all 3. However, that will be up to whoever ends up being the operator. He doesn't have an operator on board yet. Once the building is constructed and he's able to get some potential operators in there and negotiate a deal, then we'll be able to determine for certain if there will be a 3-service or a 2-service operation.
I think this came up at the last meeting. We said we were gonna ask, Rich to come to committee, and we did. It just didn't work out in the scheduling. I think it would be appropriate for him to come and you to hear, directly from him what his intent on the building are. There are some constraints in the FBO, lease. But this is kind of it's a separate entity. Skimmerhorn has multiple agreements out at the airport under different, business enterprises. So, we have the FBO, which is Rich Air, but this is not Rich Air, if that makes sense. It's all Rich Skimmerhorn, but it's a separate entity, and there's separate, contractual constraints for that. But I think it's appropriate. I'm sure Rich will come when you know, he doesn't have a scheduling conflict, but I think those are good questions, and, you know, I certainly want him to address those directly with the committee.
Ron, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say, that, back in 2010, when I became a supervisor, the airport committee was part of the Public Works Committee, of which I was a member, and, sometime later, some years later, it was decided that the airport was, in the business of the airport, was busy enough that it really needed to, have its own committee, and we merged it into facilities, which you were the first and continuing chair of, I believe, doing an admirable job on that, on the committee. But I would appreciate, weather permitting, sometime this spring, perhaps, that we could have an update walk around the airport and devote enough time to it so that we can do it in a casual way and thorough way, including all of the assets at the airport. And I think it would be a good thing, not only for committee members, but also for other supervisors as well. And the media and anyone that wishes to attend. I think we have a wonderful facility over there, and with a lot of assets, and I'm not sure everybody's fully aware of everything that's there and going on, and I think that it's something that, in fact, there should be something that we do annually, because there's things changing and going on all the time.
Mark, you had something?
I would add to that I would hope that we would include the tree clearing projects and, you know, go out and take a look at the wetlands that are in discussion and so on, not just the facilities. I'm sure that would be part of it. My final comment on breakfast is, I had breakfast with 6 Pilots just before the diner was closed, and they had a contract with Rich Air that they pointed out to me, and I'd asked in the last meeting that Martin take a look at it. It stated that there was an obligation by Rich Air to have a dining facility in the terminal. So I had asked in that meeting if the new agreement superseded the old one, I was corrected, superseded wouldn't be the right term, so Mark, though, I think was gonna go and investigate that and get back with a decision.
He was working on that.
Okay,
That was an issue, yeah.
I'd like to get back to that constituent, thank you.
Just addressing the meetings, we have even in, wintertime had our, facilities committee meetings out at the airport. We've done, I think we did that a couple years ago, maybe, and we've also done, some of the field tours, exactly what we were suggesting, where we take a van and, you know, obviously with through coordination with Ross with the aviation procedures, been able to go out on the airfield. And, so we're certainly willing to do that. We've had some apprehension in the past, due to some tripping hazards, but those have been addressed.
I was there.
Right, so those have been addressed, so I think we're comfortable having supervisors at the airport again.
Okay, is that all you have, or?
That's it.
Anyone else have anything else come before the facilities committee? Having none, motion to adjourn. Evelyn, second by Ron. All in favor? Aye.
I'll see you next week.
Opposed?
Thanks.